This is the Misdirected Mark Podcast, a podcast about gaming, game mastering, and entertaining you, our listeners. We are explicit, you have been warned, and I'd like to thank Mike Willard for letting us use his music on our show. Now let's pick up those mics and get on with this thing.
Oh, okay. So, Braun looks over the hill. What does he see?
All right. Your perception roll isn't great, but you do see spires in the distance, and they look like the pictures you saw of the Temple of Elemental Naughtiness. After your long ordeal, I'm pretty sure your destination is in sight.
Purge looks over at Braun and says, "Finally, when that wise woman gave us the map, she told us it was this way."
And the carnival... whoa. You know what?
Misdirected Mark, word scramble.
Word scramble.
And the carnival of contortionists said it was just over those hills.
When we decided to go off to the next town and check on those magic rumors, the barkeep told us it was over here.
Don't forget that the talking frog you encountered when you went into the swamps instead of following the map.
That's right. He told us the Temple of Elemental Naughtiness was over here, too.
Exactly. Yeah. You are finally looking at the spires of the temple. In the setting sun, the shadow of the western peaks casts an aura of darkness on this haven of degradation.
Wait, did you say the western peaks?
Yeah. Remember the barkeep at the Mermaid Scar told you the temples was near the western peaks, and that's how you found the temple, and now your heroes, you guys can assault the temple and free the bound region?
The western peaks. Isn't that where they said the manticores were coming from?
Well, wait, what?
That's right. One of them got away when we defended the town, and headed back toward the western peaks.
Yeah, it did.
Then we should hunt down their lair so that they don't attack us while we're in the temple later.
Great idea. Okay, Phil. Braun and Purge get their bearings, and then head out towards the western peaks.
Oh, good grief.
And with that, welcome to the 426th episode of the Misdirected Mark Podcast. Tonight we delve into different methods of running games, specifically storytelling and facilitating. Along the way, we'll take suggestions, examples, and questions from the chat room for life before jumping into the after show. But first, my name is Jerry.
My name is Phil.
And I am Old Man Logan. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the show. Before we head into the house misdirected, we have to do our temperature check, make sure everybody's all healthy and stuff, or at least healthy enough to do a show. Because, Lord knows, sometimes it's not 100%. Phil, how you doing?
Physically, I am tired and I am sore. Yesterday I received my first of the Pfizer vaccination shots. So I am now, for the next 3 weeks, part of the halfway club. So yeah, I'm okay. Like, my arm is sore. I am currently my body is currently a spike protein factory, making spike proteins for my immune system to recognize and get angry at. But yeah, that was, I'll talk about it a little more in the conversation corner, but yeah, my vaccination was yesterday and it went well. And in 3 weeks, I have my follow-up for the second Pfizer dose, which we'll also talk about in the conversation corner. Mentally, I'm a little worn down from work, kind of annoyed with some stuff, feeling a little down about work, but trying to leave that at work. It's a somewhat shitty job dragging a little into here, so I'm a little low energy right now, but I'm kind of hoping that'll perk up as we get going into the show.
We'll drag you along.
There we go. Jerry, how you doing, buddy?
Well, better now that I'm here. I've been dealing with purchasing 2 new vehicles for the company, and dealing with auto dealerships is a annoyance at best. And but I'm past that. By tomorrow, I'll have all the loans set up. I'll have the vehicles purchased, and I won't have to deal with buying a new vehicle for a couple more years. So that's as somebody who has been a salesman dealing with auto salesmen, I find it both insulting and annoying. But we're past that. So I'm here. I've got friends, and I'm looking forward to getting my spoons back up and getting a good punch of adrenaline. So that's me.
Jerry, I'm going to tell you should tip your camera down just a little.
I was just going to say I completely forgot during the warm-up.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. You're getting a little Wilson from...
Howdy, neighbor.
Yeah.
Cool. Hey, how's it going?
Babo.
All right. I am physically not bad. My neck was acting up again today a little bit. Being annoying because it's, because it has to, because I can't have just a day that goes by with nothing. I mean, that would be wrong. I'm almost 55 years old. And I gotta have daily pain and shit. And it's in the bylaws.
Something got to be hurting.
Yeah. So a little annoyed there. Mentally, not bad. It's been a pretty good day. It's been a pretty good week so far. I'm a little annoyed at some of the crap that's going on out there in the world, which we won't get into because we don't want to drag this segment out. But
no.
I'm good. So let's do a show. Let's jump in.
Let's do it.
With one thing. And hey, let me start. So I got clued in from. I follow a Star Trek account called Trek Core on Twitter, and they put up a thing for a sale that was going on, and I can't now for the life of me think of the website it was, but basically they had a box set of 3 books of Star Trek Shipyard series. So it's 2 books of Federation Starfleet and pre-Starfleet ships, broken down over 2 chunks of timelines, and then the 3rd book is other Federation members like non Starfleet and other alien races and stuff.
Zavi is the company that is doing it for you.
Yeah. So it was a really good deal. It was the 3-book box set. Each book is normally like $25 a piece, and I got the whole thing including shipping for $26 and change.
Nice.
So I was like, that looks like it's going to be really interesting. So I jumped on that and got it. It arrived today or yesterday, and I flipped through it a little bit. Very interesting if you're into that kind of thing. It's got pictures of the ships and different angles and what do you call them? Like discussions of who was on the ship and what its missions were and different stuff like that. So that kind of thing. That was very interesting, and I'm sorry I got distracted by a ding, and I'm trying to figure out where the ding came from, and now I know.
Where did that come from?
That's from my Gmail. Somebody pinged me on Google Hangouts. So. All right. So, that being said, Jerry, what's your one thing?
I watched a bizarre movie this weekend called Willy's Wonderland. It is basically 5 Nights at Freddy's, the movie, more or less, except that it's got Nicolas Cage. And it's got a fairly decent plot. It's got some other really interesting actors. It's got a fun story. And it's got Nicolas Cage drinking lots of energy drinks, playing pinball, and beating the ever-leading crap out of demonically possessed animatronic Chuck E. Cheese monster. It's better than I thought it was going to be. It happened to be on one. I belong to a group that has watch parties all the time, and it came up, and I watched it. And it's the fact that he doesn't speak for the entire movie. He does it all just by Nicolas Cage body expressions for his role in the movie. Is a lot of fun, and it's called Willy's Wonderland. If you like kind of slightly funny action horror, it's not slapstick, but if you like kind of amusing action horror movies, it's not really scary unless animatronic monster is scary, in which case it's probably terrifying. But it's a lot of fun. And it was a nice little thing to do while I was working on my Eberron campaign this week. So, it was a delight to watch. It was a pleasant surprise because, with Nicolas Cage, you can get, really good movies like, Leaving Las Vegas or you can get, The Wicker Man. And you never know what you're going to get when you get Nicolas Cage.
I was going to go with Ghost Rider, but sure, that's Wicker Man will do.
Ghost Rider wasn't Nicolas Cage's fault. I mean, Idris Elba was in Ghost Rider also, so you can't.
Well, that's the
fair.
second one.
Fair.
The second one was horrible.
What was that, Bob?
Idris Elba was in the second Ghost Rider, and that one was horrible. The first one was bad.
They were both horrible. They were both really bad, but the second one was worse. All right, Phil, how about you?
I'm gonna. My one thing for this week is iHunt. We did our session 0 for our iHunt game, and it went really well. So I did. I did a little of everything. We did the gauntlets. I don't think it's not really the gauntlets. I always forget who to credit for it, but the cats technique. We did that to open up our session 0, which I have become a big fan in terms of kind of setting expectations of using that tool for kind of talking about what is this game going to be about kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Then we did a couple of other things. Just kind of we picked a location where we wanted our iHunt to take place and a time period because we had to have kind of the discussion like, do we want to have a game in modern times that deals with COVID or not? So we decided that our show was filmed all in 2019. Even though it's coming out now, it was filmed in 2019, so no one was wearing masks during the no one wears masks during the campaign. Okay. So I was very okay with that. I thought it was a nice way to handle it. And then we actually we jumped into the mechanisms in iHunt for making characters, which is you pick out your initial aspects and then you play the pilot episode, which is this like it's a formulated outline. Like you still make it your own and you put your own choices of monsters and stuff into it, but it's this little 4-part pilot, and you don't roll any dice. You just talk and play through it, and then you use that to start figuring out your skills, like where you want to put your various skills, what you want your remaining aspects to be, and pick out your stunts. So we came up with our characters. I like them a lot. We had our and then we stopped actually to create a coffee shop because this coffee shop is probably going to be a center point in the game, which included some time to pick out the name of the coffee shop. No Middle Grounds, right? That was the name of our coffee shop.
Okay. I like it.
But then we got started. So our game is taking place in Philadelphia, and the first monster they're going to hunt is a Jersey werewolf.
Oh dear.
Yep.
So imagine like dude bros from the Jersey Shore, but also werewolves. Yeah. So that's going to be their first hunt in the pilot. But it's a really neat structure. I really like this, and actually, I like it enough that it's kind of worth stealing for other games. Like it's a really fun way to.
So what is Cats?
Oh, did we not have it? I'm sure we can find a link for it. But it stands for. Oh God, hang on. I should just know to put this out.
Yeah, I would have suggested that if I had thought of it.
Nope, it's okay. Give me 2 seconds. Cats method. Did I find it? Yes. Okay. CAT stands for concept. So at a high level, what is this game about? Aim. What we're trying to, like, what as a group are we trying to accomplish with the game? Tone. What's going to be the tone for our game? Is it funny? Is it serious? Is it dark? Is it light? And subject matter. What are some of the subjects that we might explore during gameplay? And like, what would people like to see in the game? So we had discussions around all of those things. And this Cats gets credited to Patrick O'Leary, is the original author. Comes from a 200-word RPG challenge. The Gauntlet has adopted this method for introducing games to people. I find it great. We've done it before, Jerry. I don't know if you remember, but we did it.
I know we've done it, but I can never remember what it stands for.
Yeah, we've done it before.
And that's one of those things I think we need to, like, whenever we bring up a topic, we should at least give a brief definition of it. Because like we've done it probably twice, and I can never remember where it is. So.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a really nice technique. I have like a little outline I do to kind of introduce all the parts of it, but in doing so, it kind of helps to set expectations so that we're all kind of aligned to what the game's about. And then I always do. So what I did, and I didn't mention it just before, but I do the cats section. Then I do safety. Then I do character generation. So safety, we're actually using iHunt's built-in safety tools, which has a kind of lines and veils tool called levels,
Cool.
which was really good. And instead of the X card, we're going to use the game's built-in mechanism called the commercial break, which is kind of a combination of a consent-revoking de-escalation and editing tool, all rolled up in one, because you're supposed to treat the game kind of like a serialized TV show, so you can at times in the game just go to break.
Okay,
and then if you need to edit anything or remove content, you can do that. Or if you just need to kind of, de-escalate, like it was a really intense scene, let's all come down from it, cool, roll to commercial. So anyway, it went really well. I really like the characters, and almost instantly the chemistry started with the three characters. So I'm liking where it's going. Like it's a good solid start for a new campaign.
I totally did not expect to be the more seasoned hunter of the group. I got a couple of noobs I got to drag along.
Yeah, this is good.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, one of my favorite things is aspect creation, because it's a Fate game.
Yep. And
just the creativity of some of the aspects. Bob had such a good one for his day job. So Bob's character concept is basically a Peter Parker-like character, right? Like if Peter Parker had seen Uncle Ben get eaten by a zombie, right? Along those lines.
Instead of getting spider powers, I saw Uncle Ben get killed by a monster, and so I decided to buff up and go fight monsters because somebody had to do it.
Yep.
And so,
which is your main aspect.
Which is
somebody's got to do it.
Is my I don't even know.
High concept.
High concept. Thank you. And then for my day job, I said, okay, I'm going to be a freelance photographer because I'm going to ride this concept like I stole it, because I did. I said, for my day job aspect, I'm going to call it, with great photos comes mediocre payment.
Yeah. So really good. It was just really good, solid, fun. I like it. So our next session, we have to kind of finish out playing our pilot. And then, I think we'll do a little bit of world building and then get into our first, hunt. I want to define probably a few more NPCs and stuff outside of from either they come out of the pilot or after the pilot, but it's cool. It's a good start. Okay. Let's roll into announcements. Let me start off with a somber one. I think a number of people, if you were on Twitter today, you certainly saw it. Morgan Ellis, game designer, credited with a lot of work in Fate. Really cool person. A lot of people knew Morgan on Twitter. A lot of people knew Morgan from seeing him at conventions, but Morgan passed away today, and that was really sad. I've met Morgan a few times at a couple different conventions. Got a chance to play with Morgan once in PK Sullivan through Rocketeers game at Origins one. I think that maybe that was 2019. I'm losing track thanks to COVID of the exact year, but I always enjoyed Morgan's tweets. There was a whole string of things Morgan had done earlier in 2020, just making characters and just posting like character creations on Twitter, and did a run of TMNT. He did Roadhogs actually, which was even more fun because he did a whole TMNT character plus his badass Mad Max car and all of that. So yeah, we're just hearts go out to Morgan's family and to all of Morgan's friends. Had a lot of close friends in the community, and we're just it sucks.
Yeah.
And we're just a bit sad tonight over that. Okay. So moving on from that, next week we begin the Voyager Watch Party. That is going to be starting March 9th on Tuesday after the show. We'll start at 11:30 p.m. Eastern with Caretaker, the first 2-part episode. We talked about it before. We'll be doing this in the exact same format we've done TNG and DS9. So we're going to do a week-to-week viewings, with every Tuesday being a online viewing together where we watch 2 episodes. We're going to go through all 7 seasons. Got like 100 and I forget how many episodes. It's less than DS9, but more than our TNG tour. So we're going to get into it. You guys are going to earn your Delta Quadrant patches. And we'll take a full watch of Voyager and kind of, I'm hoping I'm going to be interested. This will be my second watching this year. And I'm interested to see what I kind of pick up, in my second watching. So, yeah, that's getting started. I will this weekend post a link in Slack and on the forums with the, first week of shows. So I will do that. And then that will become a weekly thing. Every Sunday I will post up the next week of shows, and get us started. And as usual, we'll have, if people want to have chats in the chat room, we can absolutely, have chats about individual episodes, etc. So that's all starting next week.
Cool.
So clear your schedules. Cool. Hey, Jer, can you tell me about Kickstarter?
We have a Kickstarter coming. It is, there we go. It's by our own High Court member, John Lemay. It's called, not opening up on me. Spivey Inspired by National Parks. And there we go. Got it. It's called Inspired by National Parks. There we go. For some reason I was freezing up. I apologize. It's, John Lemay is doing a Kickstarter called 5e, Inspired by National Parks. And it's going to be 5 adventures that are going to have battle maps and photos and artwork and videos and monsters and voice acting, and I believe it's going to have virtual tabletop icons and the like for running 5e adventures in actual national parks. It's on Kickstarter right now. It's almost funded already, and you got 22 days left to go at the time of this. So a week from now, you're going to have about 15 days left, and it's going to be basically adventures about primordials beneath the surface. So
nice. And I'm going to double shout out that this is John Lemay, who's a High Court member of the Misdirected Mark Patreons. So we're gonna make a little extra push here. This is one of our own, who's doing a Kickstarter. So if you can show some love to the project, that would be a huge deal. To give John that push to get it over into the funded side of Kickstarter. So let's all see what we can do about helping out a member of our community.
If you go to the actual Kickstarter page, he's got some prototypes you can download and look at what he's got. And he's even got it available for, if you're just interested in 1 or 2 adventures, you don't have to buy the whole thing. You can just buy pieces of it. So definitely go take a look at it. Give it a shot.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Plus you can play Prairie Dog people, which is always cool.
Yep.
Prairie Dog.
Prairie Dogs.
All right. I guess that means that we are ready for the feature segment. So, Phil, gird yourself.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Begin.
Storyteller and Facilitator, 2 sides of the same coin. How are you running your game? Are you telling a story? Are you facilitating a story? Are you doing a little of both? We're going to talk all about it tonight in the workshop.
Don't suck.
Yay. I got to take a sip and then I'll start us off. All right. This past week on Friday, I wrote an article for Gnome Stew that is exactly about tonight's topic. And I like writing articles for Gnome Stew because it's fun. But it's only 1,500 words, and it's non-interactive. So it's just 1,500 words of me talking about this topic. So I thought it'd be more fun, because we have a podcast, to just take the topic and throw it on the show, and expand upon it, and actually kind of look at it in a couple different, like, a little bit differently, but also to get our own feedback in the second section on it. So Jerry and Bob were in, and here we are.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting. This is something that's kind of near and dear to me, is how we run games. And tonight's topic is going to be about storytellers and story facilitators. We're going to look at what they are, what they do, how the games they play, and how groups interact with them, and how they kind of blend into each other. But in order to do that, we're going to have to set our definitions. So, Phil, what are the storyteller and the facilitator?
Here, let me do this thing here.
Okay.
Behold! You are in the presence of Definition Panda.
All right. Neither of these terms are actually set in the RPG vernacular, so we are going to define them here for the sake of our segment tonight. You're free to carry these definitions onward, but know that they're pretty much, being set up inside the confines of this discussion, and your mileage may vary when you take them out of this discussion. So the storyteller is a type of GM who crafts a story that they want to share with their players at the table. The player characters are the protagonists of the story, as the storyteller kind of guides the players through the plot. The defining trait of the storyteller is the idea that the scenario they're running is a story that they're telling to the players, and that at some level, whether they hold on to it loosely or tightly, they have some idea of the outcome of the story when it concludes. And their job is to make that story unfold and guide the players through it. And like I said, they often have some idea of how the story will end. But as we'll talk about as we get a little further into this topic, how much they hold on to that is going to be kind of a determination of what kind of storyteller they are. The story facilitator is the type of GM who sees their job as helping the group as a whole create a story through play. They often have an idea of a plot or a challenge to kind of get things started, but not much beyond that. Through play, characters will figure out how to resolve the plot or challenge, and the GM's there to engage the rules as well as the narrative to add things to keep the game developing and keep it from, going stale or, running out of steam. The defining trait of the facilitator is the idea that they have an idea of how things will start, but are totally open to how the game's going to end. They don't really focus on the ending because the ending's a thing that happens at the table. And so their job is to set things up and then make way for the players to determine how things are going to end. And they're equally surprised in many cases as the players at how the story turns out. So for tonight, think of these as preferences. Think of these as approaches that a GM might have. I don't necessarily think of them as like a GM is one of these things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. So is one of these better than the other, Jerry? Is being a facilitator in today's type of gaming better than being a storyteller?
Not at all, because it's not really a versus kind of thing. It's not one or the other. There are merits and flaws in both these approaches. Both can give you exciting adventures, it can give you memorable games, it can give you good role playing, but you can do one or the other or both and blend them together. In addition, there's a lot of GMs that are bad at one or the other, and if that happens, it can result in horrible games if you try to run a facilitated game if you're really more of a storyteller or vice versa. So we're going to talk about examples of the good and the bad of both these approaches, and then talk about how to blend them. So Phil?
Yeah, so like if you're a good storyteller, right, you are creating a captivating narrative that's exciting and entertaining. You can have like really intricate plots, subplots, twists, those kinds of things that you've kind of planned out to reveal to the players. Like, oh, the players will be surprised when, the players are going to love this when, this twist kicks in kind of thing. And as a good storyteller, the characters have ample agency, and any alterations or deviations from the story the GM had in mind, the good storyteller will incorporate that and adapt the story, as they go between sessions, that kind of thing.
All right. Now, there are bad storytellers, and bad storytellers almost always end up with what people think of traditionally as the railroad, the bad railroad. This is where the story is going to override the agency of the characters to maintain their own story. You're going to have situations where the players want to do something, but they can't because it wrecks the GM story. This is going to involve things like the NPC who simply can't be killed, players not being able to take any side stories, that sort of thing. And when that happens, you end up with a bad game, or at least a game that's less fun for a lot of players.
Yeah, I agree. A good facilitator, switching over to the good side now, a good facilitator initiates play with an exciting issue or plot to get things going. They engage the players to find out what they're going to do. And along the way, they use the rules of the game to keep the flow of the game going, as well as filling in any additional elements, locations, NPCs, as needed during play. And if things stall out on the player side, they'll jump in with ideas and action to keep that flow going. The story organically unfolds until it reaches a logical conclusion.
Now, if you have a bad facilitator, they're going to be unprepared. They're going to bring very little to start off the game, and they're going to keep relying on the players to keep things moving. They're going to push a lot of the work onto the players to make things happen, instead of working with the players to have things happen. And they're not really going to manage the flow of the game. And when that happens, the game just stalls or loses direction because it feels like there's nothing planned and that there's really no adventure except just people wandering around. And that can lead to games that just leave people frustrated.
Yeah, and I think that, like a lot of times we see people boo to the storyteller and, the facilitator, yay to the facilitator when, I don't often think that that's the problem, right? I will say I think both of these are completely valid approaches if done well. Mm-hmm. But I think what happens is a lot of times a GM who prefers one approach plays a game that winds up requiring the other approach.
Right.
And when that mismatches is where, we get this ill fit.
Mm-hmm. For example, you have a GM who's a very good storyteller with structured adventures, structured stories, who has get to the beginning, middle, and end, and then they try to use that approach and try to run Fiasco, which should be as freeform as possible. It's not that the GM themselves is bad, but rather that sort of game requires a different approach. An approach they're using is not going to be in alignment with the rules of the game itself. So we don't say that it's a bad approach, we simply say that a better approach for Fiasco would be a facilitator. So, which is only true of the concept of that game and not RPGs in general. Lots of RPGs work very well with a storyteller, and lots of RPGs work very well with a facilitator. So, Phil?
So, if neither approach is good or bad, are you a storyteller or a facilitator, Phil?
Yeah. So, there are no absolutes to this, right? There's never one or the other. You are never a facilitator. You are never a storyteller, right? You are always some blend of both of these things. Yep. But it probably means that it's possible to have a stronger preference for one of these than the other. And to simplify that concept, and I think it's a bit of an oversimplification, but I think it's going to work for the discussion tonight. We can say that your GMing style is some percentage of storyteller, some percentage of facilitator.
And to be honest, it's very rare you're going to find somebody who's just 50-50 down the line. They're going to be 60-40 or 70-30. They're going to have a stronger preference for one or the other, but they're going to blend the two together. In some cases, you might find somebody who's at one extreme or the other, but every RPG has some amount of storytelling, and every RPG has some amount of facilitating. So you can't really get away from one completely.
Yeah, and your preference, right? The higher percentage. Your preference for this is going to come from how you as a GM derive enjoyment from GMing?
If you're a storyteller with a strong preference, your joys are to come from sharing the stories you're creating with your players and seeing how your players deal with the world and the plots of stories that you created for them. As a facilitator, your joys are to come from the act of creation at the table, seeing how the improv process takes place and creates something from everybody's ideas together.
Yeah, and again, you're likely both of these. So you're even getting pleasure from both of these, right? So it's not that if your preference is storyteller, you only enjoy the storyteller part of the game and the and the facilitator part you gain no pleasure from. You're going to get pleasure from both of these, but knowing which one is the stronger preference is going to inform you of how you more enjoy to run a game, right? What brings you more enjoyment, as well as the types of games and the groups that are also going to play into that.
Yeah. So, Jerry, tell me how your preferences help to determine the types of games that you'll enjoy more than others.
All right, and some of this is going to be based on the games you play. As you mentioned earlier in our fiasco example, some games are written with a certain GMing approach in mind. Not all games are designed for one approach or the other. There are definitely games that fit one approach better. So we're going to talk a little bit about what these games might look like.
Yeah, so a game that's good for storytellers, right? A game that these kinds of games probably fall into more what we would call the traditional, right? The trad category, which really just means that narrative control remains mostly centered with the GM. Right? That means that the GM sets the scenes, they close the scenes, they interpret the outcome of dice rolls, right? They do what we imagine like in most traditional role-playing games. So, games easily like D&D, Call of Cthulhu, those kinds of things, are very traditional style games. And the reason these games work out well for storytellers is that it puts the narrative control in most of the narrative control in the hands of the GM, which lets them steer the narrative of the game and allows them to bring the story out to the players through play.
Now, games that are good for facilitators are going to be games where the narrative control is much more distributed. Players have more abilities to set scenes, they can create twists, they can interpret outcomes. Games like PBTA, Dungeon World, Mask, things like that. They even enjoy games where there's no GM role whatsoever. Games like Fiasco or games like Turning Point. Games that have a more distributive narrative control are going to allow everyone to be able to contribute to the story, and this makes the GM a true facilitator.
Yeah. So as you come to understand your preference of storyteller and facilitator, where you're getting your enjoyment from, the question you got to start asking yourself is, are you playing games that make that happen? Like, are you playing the games that align to where you're deriving most of your enjoyment?
And it's possible to have a preference for one approach, but play a game that supports the other.
Okay.
Yes.
So, Phil, how does the group that we play with also tie into our preferences as GMs?
Yeah. Well, your players also have preferences. In terms of these two things, right? Your players have a preference about this too, right? They may totally love participating in that story that's being told to them, right? They may want to create everything on the spot. Conversely, they could get bored when a game is a structured story, or they could go into a cold sweat if they're required to make up things on the fly in a game. So now imagine as the GM, your preference sets the tone for the game, and the game you're playing may even reinforce that. What happens when those two things are not in alignment with the player's preferences?
Then you need to know what kind of players you've got. So what kind of players enjoy storytelling more? These are players who enjoy playing at the character level and not at the story level. They're going to be players who are not comfortable with improvising content. They're players who want to relax a bit and have the story come to them and then they have them react to it. They're players who are basically going to want to follow a thread and follow a story.
Yeah. What kind of players enjoy facilitating more, right? These are players who have an equal or stronger interest in the story of their characters, right? These are people who think less about So they think more about like what would be cooler for the story to happen to my character, even if that puts my character in a terrible place, right? Because that's just going to be more fun for that's going to be more fun for the story, and less about like being inside their character's head. So sometimes these players tend to bounce between those two levels, start to refer to their character sometimes in the first person, sometimes in the third person, right? Like as it's more convenient. They could be players who just like to create things during the game. Like they have ideas about how, things should work and they want to be able to contribute to the narrative, to the plot, that kind of thing. And they could also be other GMs, because GMs normally do this even in traditional games. So they may be, other GMs that might dig, being, playing in a game that's more facilitated.
So, like we talked about with the games we're playing, you always want to look at the preferences of the people in your group.
Yeah, so it's very possible you have a group
that wants one.
You guys are like colorblind tonight. It's very possible you have a group that wants one approach, and your enjoyment of gaming comes from the other approach.
That is definitely possible.
That is definitely possible. Bob and I have been there.
All right. Before we break, can you crystallize the importance of these approaches?
Yeah. So what we're talking about, right, is we're talking about these two things, and we're talking about putting things into alignment, right? So in all GMs, there's some amount of storyteller, there's some amount of facilitator.
And we're going to derive enjoyment from one of these approaches much more than the other.
Yeah, and it's important to know what mix of these we are so that we know where that enjoyment's coming from.
Yeah. And some of these games are going to be best played with one approach or the other. If we run games that match our approach, we're going to derive more enjoyment from it.
Right, and players have their own preferences when it comes to these approaches. If we run games for players who match that approach, they're going to have more fun, and in return, so will we.
Mm-hmm. So, this is the first part of our segment. We're going to check in the chat room for a moment. But first, Bob's going to tell us about another show on the Misdirected Mark Network.
Yes, the recently renamed Mastering Dungeons, although probably not that recently anymore. Mastering Dungeons with RPG veterans and game designers Teos Abadai and Sean Merwin, who look at the game and the hobby of D&D from a variety of viewpoints, reporting the news, understanding the business, reviewing the products, and illuminating the design. Whether you're a fan, a player, a DM, or a designer, Sean and Teos cover topics of interest to you. New ad copy for this. I love it.
Well, there's some new ad. We got to make new ad copy for a couple of these.
Yeah.
But that's all right. How's our chat room tonight?
Yeah, they're engaged. We had a visit from Chris, who has since ducked out to watch TV with the missus. Jared popped in to say hello. He's not, unfortunately, in a very good headspace to participate much tonight.
Nope, definitely understand.
But during the course of the discussion, Queen Senda said that while discussing this, I think we can also reference the reactive and proactive sides of GMing as well. And that made me think of that typical chart with the plus, where one quadrant is this, one quadrant is that. And so, facilitator, storyteller, proactive, reactive, and where that
cool, that'd
together.
Be fun to do. We do a little Punnett square action on that.
Is that what that's called? I couldn't think of it.
In genetics, it is. In genetics, it's a Punnett square.
So I thought that would be an interesting exercise.
I think it'd be very neat.
She's putting one together already.
Yeah, see, there we go.
That's
hard at work on it.
But Chris was actually tagging what he thought people's percentages were as we were going through. He thinks you're pretty much 50-50 or as close to 50-50 as you can get, Phil.
My assessment's a little different because we're going to get to that in the next segment, but it's not off by much. It's not off by much. I definitely have likes on both sides of that, but I will also state that over the years, my preferences for those have changed. And I think did we leave ourselves open a question for that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, we did. Okay, so I won't go into that in this segment, but Yeah, no, but yeah, that's and that's probably another part about it that we didn't really touch on in the first part, is that like your tastes in these things can totally change.
It's a fluid thing.
Yeah.
So one, it can change just because your way of deriving enjoyment in the game changes. So that could be a permanent thing. Like for me, not a permanent, but like a long-term thing. Like for me, from 2010 till now, my preference for how I like to game has changed a bunch. But saying that, if you are particularly into a certain type of game and you are getting your enjoyment from the game, it can actually change that. So, for instance, I was a huge fan of our Tales from the Loop game, which was a way more storyteller game than it was facilitating.
Mm-hmm.
And it was totally fine to be way more into storytelling for that campaign, because the act of playing that game was so enjoyable.
Yeah.
Like, so so these things aren't, I guess, here's what I've learned. Here's what I've learned coming up on 10 plus years of GMing advice, right? I'm always afraid when we name these things out like this, that people think that these things are either absolutes or etched in stone or all of these things. And the truth of the matter is, over my time, all this stuff is mutable, right? Like my preference in gaming changed over the years, but if I play a game like Knights Black Agents, Tales from the Loop, like then I wind up playing it like way more storyteller. And I'm okay with that for a while. And, and then something like, and we'll talk about this in a second, but something like Forbidden Lands is like a very traditional game, but it actually winds up being like a half facilitator game for me, in like a really interesting mix of storyteller and facilitator that entertains me. So none of these things are absolutes. It's really just kind of having an awareness. As I say that, I now have the idea for my next GM book, which is going to be like kind of understanding like your GMing style, and that how much of that goes into what you enjoy about playing, what games you should play, how you should play, like who you should be playing with, like those kinds of things, like finding our inner joy in gaming. Like I'm going to get all philosophical or something
there you go.
about it, but I think it's true. I think that I think that sometimes we miss the mark, that sometimes we're more concerned about what people expect us to do than we really reflect on what really is giving us joy about what we get out of the game.
Yeah.
This might be my, if Never Unprepared was my love letter to getting things done, perhaps this next book will be my love letter to Marie Kondo. There you go. Does this game bring you joy? Let it go.
Yeah.
No, just let it go.
Like, I'm getting nothing from this. Let it go.
I may have to go read that book and then kind of ruminate on role playing and just I have some thoughts. I'm having some feels about this philosophically. Like,
you could use another book from Phil.
Mm-hmm.
I like writing them. I like writing them. It'd be kind of fun to do another GMing book. And I own a publishing company.
What? It's almost like you could do the whole thing soup to nuts.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I probably could. I do need an editor.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, cool. I'm going to stop talking about that. I'm going to just ponder that for a little bit.
Well, that's a good time for us to slide back into the second segment of this show, which is our favorite, the round table, where we grab 3 questions and we throw them out, and then we beat them around like volleyball or badminton or tennis or something.
A little nervous where you were going with that analogy, but thank you. That's much better.
We bat it around like a
shuttlecock. Like a shuttlecock is what you're trying to say.
Something along those lines.
It's just a fun word to say.
Question number 1. In terms of a GM, in terms of being a GM, where do you rate your storyteller facilitator mix? Jerry?
I think I'm about 40-60, and it's going to depend on what game I'm running and who I'm running for. I'll be honest, I like to have some idea of where I want my plot to go. I'm like, okay, I want to have a murder mystery, and I know that this is going to be the bad guy, and this is who he killed, and this is why he's doing it, and this is what his end goal is supposed to be. But after that, I'm going to leave it up to the players to kind of figure out what happens in there. Some things are going to go on in the background, depending on what the heroes do, but it's going to go where it's going to go. I will sometimes run more structured things. For example, I'll sometimes take an existing module and strip it down. You know, I've got a bunch of scenes where things are going to go, but how the players get there, what they do, what order things happen in might change drastically. People who have played games with me in modules that are professionally written, they find out that they're all over the place because the players decide to do something different. I'll let them go there. You know, they can go off to the Western Mountains and go hunt manticores for a while if they want. And I've had entire campaigns that have changed because the PC's actors in the first story are. I had a entire campaign, and in week one of the players decided to seduce and then completely romance the main bad guy's like lieutenant, and that changed the scope of the game entirely from that point on because the players were now involved with the bad guy in a totally different way, and that's okay. So I'm not quite as freeform where I'm just going to come to the table and say, okay, you guys are in a city, what do you want to do? I'm going to have some plot involved, but I like more and more when the players take actions, make changes, set things that are real in the game, that sort of thing, and move from there. So that's how we go. How about you, Phil?
Yeah, me. You know, it's funny. I think I'm also 40-60 storyteller facilitator. And I'll hint to the last question. I was not always that way. Actually, that number has shifted quite a bit over the years. But I actually really like, I like story as the connective tissue between sessions. So I like coming up with a cool starting point. Then I don't want to know a thing about how we're going to get to the end of the problem until we get to the table. Then I like to take whatever happened and stitch that into how that's going to play out to the next story, the future story, how that affects the arc or whatever. But what I really, where I derive my joy in at the table is that I really don't want to know what's going to happen when I'm playing. I want to sit down, present a problem, and like just set the players loose. And then I really like, for me, a successful game is a successful game that I GM is when it ends. And I know Bob's heard this phrase before, and I think Jerry has too, where it ends and I look and I laugh and I go, ha, I did not expect that that's how this was going to go down tonight. Any one of those derivative phrases, right? Like, to me, that is the most fun. When I am like honestly surprised about what happened at the table, whether it be somebody said something, whether it be somebody took an action that, like, you know, like in our DCC game when Jim got that great roll and in that last session and, you know, pinned that Trask-esque thing into the, you know, like down in the pit with his word of command. And I was like, wow, that's totally not how I was thinking this fight was going to go. And I was like thrilled with it, right? Like, I don't care that you guys beat it up in like, you know, 5 turns instead of like 20 turns. I thought it was great. Like, I was genuinely surprised. And it's my reason why I love PBTA games, because I love that moment of a 7 and 9 comes up and somebody's like, oh, I'm going to take offer me a worse deal, Phil. Right? And I'm like, okay. And, you know, and like spit something out. Or even on a 6-, not that I like making, necessarily making moves, but I like when like something falls short and it's like, okay, well, how do we just make this situation worse than it already is? Right? Like, what can we add on to it? I love that. So for me, I say 40-60, but there are probably times where that goes 30-70.
Yeah.
But I do love a good story, right? So I think 40-60 is a fair assessment because Once we get away from the table, then I'm back to, okay, well, how does this play out plot-wise?
Yeah.
How does this play out with NPCs? That kind of thing. So there's still a storyteller part of me. Now, I will say, like Jerry, game has a big influence on this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to stay away from that third question. Have various games and groups. Yep, okay, I'm going to leave it alone. That number can shift temporarily for the right game, like I said earlier in the break.
I'd like to add something in here. I think it also has to do with whether or not it's a campaign or a one-shot. Because I think one-shots may lean you in either direction depending on what you're doing, too.
Oh, I've run one-shots in both ways. I've run one-shots as the storyteller, like, behold my masterpiece of one-shot story. You know, I hope you enjoyed your experience, and I have, you know, also shown up with an index card and been like, cool, let's kick this thing, you know, and just see where it goes. Like, I've done both. So yeah, but currently my enjoyment primarily comes out of facilitation. The amount of time I spend prepping a game is far less than what I spend actually playing it. Babo, you have not been behind the screen in years, but you have been before.
So damn long. Way back in the day, I was a storyteller, and damn it, if I wasn't going to tell that story, and you players aren't getting in my way. And those are lessons that were very hard learned. That you can't do that. It's
I remember in particular being in the basement of our West Seneca apartment playing Palladium one night where, boy, I tried something, and you were like, nope.
Yeah. That was bad, GM Bob. Bad. I was not good. But I was determined to tell the story. I like to think that now I would be way more of a facilitator, but I put numbers in the show notes. Those numbers are meaningless because I really, until I sit down, like we just said, depending on what style of game it is and who I'm at the table with and all that stuff like that, I could still be leaning heavily storyteller, just in a more efficient and player-friendly manner. So you don't know. But yeah, I used to be the storyteller, bad man.
Now I tease you about that, but at that same period of time, so was I. Like, I was like drunk on storytelling during that time period, which I'm going to save a little bit more for the next question. But like, you were not alone in that. Like, I was also a ridiculous storyteller.
I was just worse at it than you.
I was smoother. It wasn't that it wasn't like I wasn't manipulating you guys during the game. I just had gotten really good at doing it where no one noticed. And that's, things like Schrodinger's encounters and things like that.
I think it also depends on when and how you got into gaming. I think that back in the 70s and 80s, we were kind of taught the storytelling method of GMing, and the idea that the GM was all powerful and the players were really just there to ride along with you for a while was part of what we did. And then as games got more sophisticated and gamers got more experience, and we started to bring in more and more people that were from more diverse groups, we started to see better expansion of game types, and we started to see facilitating being offered. And then, of course, there's a lot of games that are written for it now, where I think a game like Fiasco or Dungeon World is a lot different than, second edition D&D.
Yeah, I mean, I would almost postulate that the Forge movement was a reaction against the more storytelling tradition. And you're right, Jerry. Like, I came up through classic D&D. I came up through the, behold, I am GM. You have no other GMs before me. Unless you're playing with the other guys down the road, and then, no GMs when you're here before me, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I came up through that storyteller thing, and it wasn't like that wasn't reinforced. I mean, look, there wasn't an internet, so probably a guy 2 towns over was facilitating the shit out of his BX game.
Yeah.
But like, I wasn't, because I was taught by like kind of this maniacal killer GM, who ruled his table with, with a heavy hand. And so, I was a bit better than that, but I was still, massive storyteller, and not facilitator. And then your only outlet, at that point was Dragon. And Dragon, had articles about storytellers and jokes about, that classic trope of like, oh, I prepped all this stuff and then my players hung out in the tavern. Like, that trope comes from somewhere. Right? And it comes from the idea that the storyteller has prepped all this adventure, and then the players have gone, basically to do something that wasn't prepped, and now the storyteller is in this conundrum. And that's why facilitator players laugh at that trope, because they're just like, whatever, guess we're going to do a story about the tavern today. And again, there was, for some time, I will say that, I felt very pressured in the 2010s. I felt very pressured to get out of storytelling and get into facilitation. That you weren't a cool GM, if you were still doing like the full storyteller thing, which is, when I started really working on facilitation. And I don't know if that was necessarily fair. I think that was a trend.
Right,
and I think that, the end result. What's that, Bob?
I'm going to snip you there because we're starting to beat this question.
Okay, all right, let's move on.
We got to move on to question number 2. So,
Sorry. Thank you for intervening.
You're welcome.
Yes.
All
right.
Question
2 is Bob has saved the day. As a player, what kind of storyteller facilitator mix do you like in your GM?
Yeah, so again, with the caveat that, boy, there are so many things that go into the fluctuation of this. I would definitely prefer someone more on the facilitator side. I like to lean that way because that gives you more player agency, yada, 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 and all those things. That, I think, is the sweet spot for me. All the other stuff still works. But leaning towards facilitator, I think I would prefer a GM that leans that way. That's my thought.
As a person who GMs 90% of the time and like plays 10% of the time, I also need to play with a GM who's a facilitator, right? Like I can't not create stuff when I'm in an RPG. Like if I play an only story-based game, like I will lose my mind. Like I will become so frustrated because I will want to keep trying to, but what about this? What if this happened? What if so if I'm just playing with a GM who's doing that or in a game that does that, like I'm much better. I will level out.
You may as well play a text adventure at that point. So.
But I mean, again, there's no wrong, bad fun here. So there are people who love like sitting in and playing a story. I'm just not one of them because I'm so hands-on that I just like, I get fidgety. How about you, Jer?
I like a GM who's got a plot in mind and how they would resolve it, but flexible to change the heroes make their actions. I've been in games with GMs where it's obvious that the GM had a start and had a finish, but had no idea on how to get us there, and partway through has no idea what the players are supposed to be. They created a problem that they themselves didn't find a solution for. And that sometimes happens where you get to the point where you see that you had a problem. So I want a GM who's going to let us be flexible, but also has some idea where things are going. I played a game a couple of years ago where we were part of a group of investigators in a town, and at least it felt this way, that the GM didn't know how to give us any of the clues or what the clues were, because we had 5 outlets to follow. We followed all 5. At the end of those 5 outlets, we had no idea what was going on or who the bad guy was, except for the fact that it wasn't those 5 people. And that was several weeks of exploring. And so it didn't feel like, while the GM was giving us lots of room to explore, it didn't feel like we had any direction. And so as a result, we had to basically kind of beat stick it at the end to figure out what's going on. And that can be frustrating. At that point, you feel like, while you've got lots of flexibility, you also feel like nothing you do matters. And
that's the worst.
I think that part of being a facilitator is to make sure that the players' actions matter. Not every single action, but what they're doing has some effect on what's going on, both in the world and also in the story.
Even if, and I'll say this, I just tack a phrase onto that.
Oh, go on, please do.
even if that complicates the story you had in mind.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Especially if it complicates the story of mind. If you've got the right group of players, that's excellent. And that's just it. I want to see that sort of thing. So I want a facilitator, but I want a facilitator with a goal in mind. And they have to be flexible enough to move things around. If they had a 3-day time clock on it, and the players are having a lot of fun adventuring with something, and that time clock suddenly goes from 3 days to 5 days, that's fine. Unless it's vitally important that 3 days is it.
Yeah.
In which case you've got to let the players know that 3 days is it. And that's what I'm looking for. I want a GM who's going to have a loose framework, maybe a flow chart, with lots of open ends on it. The Betty White theory, in the Golden Girls, they often had spaces where they just said Betty White tells a St. Olaf story. And that's it. And that's kind of what I want from a GM, is they know something's going to happen, and then at this point, they're going to put the players in that situation, and shenanigans will ensue, and the players may come up with something. And, I've been in games where it's also obvious that the players came up with a better plot than the GM decided to just ride it.
Sure.
And that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. Because, like you said, the GM was excited by where things are going and didn't really, was having more fun with it. So go with it. That's what I want. I want a GM who's going to facilitate with us, but have a goal in mind and something they can kind of give us direction if we do kind of get lost. So, all right. And that brings me to question 3, which is, how do the various games and groups have influenced your mix in the past and in the present? So, Phil?
Hacking my knuckles on this one. All right.
You've been chomping at the bit all evening. Go for it.
Because these are the things that kind of lurk around in my head when I come up with these topics, right? Because having 40 years of gaming experience gives you this great lens to kind of look at what you've done over time. Look, I was like a 90-10 storyteller. Mm-hmm. By the time Bob I found Bob, I was bad. Here's the thing. I not only derived my enjoyment from telling a story, but I started after a while deriving my own personal enjoyment from guessing what the players were going to do and just writing that into the adventure. I gotten good enough to kind of figure everyone else out. And then if that failed, I had gotten really good at creating the illusion of free choice, where a lot of times, it wasn't a free choice. And I, refer to Schrodinger's encounters, right? This encounter, no matter what door you pick, I know which encounter's coming next, right? Those are things that I got really good at doing. That allowed me to keep, I could tell the story I wanted to tell. And I was kind of drunk on that for a while. Behold this master story I have crafted, and enjoy, as I set it out before you. And it was a huge ego, it was an ego problem kind of thing. I have since then, over time, have moved into, more of a, servant leadership mindset when it comes to gaming, which is my job here is really to make sure we're all going to have a good time. Mm-hmm. Right. So, I'm very much now about, let me lead us through an enjoyable experience together. Mm-hmm. Right. I'm happy to lead and facilitate this game, but my enjoyment of it is that everybody enjoyed it. Yeah. That's where I get my enjoyment now, from gaming. And that's a very different, what's that, Bob?
They say cue the Willy Wonka song.
Yeah. But it's a very different, point of ego. When I was in my 20s and 30s, I had a real ego and control, problem. And in my late 30s and into my 40s, I saw the bad sides of what that was. And as a whole personality, kind of changed my personality over, to something that was more, how can I help others have, a good time? How can I help others, period? That kind of thing. And it's how I wound up being a project manager. It has a lot to do with some other areas of my life. has a lot to do with my game mastering. But I've read books on servant leadership, and I'm very much in that mindset. So for me, over time, because my own personality changed, the way I derived enjoyment from GMing changed, which then fell in line with what games brought me enjoyment, which Bob knows this from our own shared game history, led to the breakup of one of our gaming groups.
Mm-hmm.
And starting a whole new gaming group. Because the rest of that gaming group, those players did not want to play facilitated games. They wanted to play story-based games, as Bob and I were kind of changing styles.
Yep.
And we don't play with those people anymore. They're still playing games. We're not gaming with them. So, it's an absolute truth that your style, like, at times will not mesh with groups, and sometimes that is not able to be reconciled.
Mm-hmm.
Other times you can just fix things. Like, the reason we're not playing Numenera right now was Bob, Tony, Glenn, and I were playing it. It's a very traditional game. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a quite lovely game. I think it's one of the best games a new GM could run. But it is very much a storyteller kind of game. And the facilitator there's plenty of facilitating in that game. There's no mechanics for it. And I eventually just got kind of bored running it. I was like, I think I've kind of, spanned all the mechanics of this game. Like, that's interesting. I need something more fiddly. And, having just started iHunt and kind of rereading and reminding myself, reviewing Fate reminded me, I'm like, right, I fucking love Fate, right? Like, every time I wander away from it, like, I come back and I'm like, oh, right, I fucking love this system. Like, it has just the right mix of mechanics and story. Like, it has some story, but teller parts, but it's heavy facilitation. Fits me very well. So that was just a case where I had to say to my gaming group, I'm like, I'm not getting the joy. Like, we're playing cool stories, like, we're telling cool stories at the table, but not getting joy out of the way I'm running this game.
You need to get the joy.
And having very good players, they were like, cool, let's jettison that.
Yeah.
like cool, let's pick up another game. Let's go find something else. So, yeah, absolutely. Games have influenced this. And like I've said, and I'll keep it short and I'll kick it over. My 40-60 or sometimes 30-70 storyteller facilitator mix can change if I'm playing a mystery game. I don't like facilitated mysteries as much as I like story-told mysteries. Facilitated mysteries they're a thing, and you can do them. They sometimes come out weird, and if I'm going to do a mystery, I'm like, nope, fuck it, I'll write the thing. I will facilitate the part where you find clues, but I'm going to write a thing about what happened. You're going to find the clues in a more facilitated manner, but I know what happened. We're not working to find out together. Like, you're just going to work to figure it out while I'm running it. And I like that. Tales from the Loop was like that. And so was Knights Black Agents. And I was very comfortable running those for periods of time, because to me, I get more enjoyment out of a mystery like that. Okay. I'm good. Jer.
All right. Well, I'm glad that you hit on that, because I was actually going to talk about the same thing, mystery. So that's the one thing I think is really important, is that if I'm going to run anything where you're running a mystery, it's going to be much more heavily storytold, because I've got, number one, I'm not good at mysteries, and number two, if I'm going to do them, I have to have a very set idea of what's happening when and who's doing what, or else it's very easy to get lost, and then my players are going to end up feeling lost because I'm feeling lost. So we'll see what happens with those. But as far as games, growing up, I was very much storyteller, probably like 80% storyteller, 90% storyteller even. And when I got to college, my college game group was always going on side treks. And it happened all the time. This was the group I was playing with, 3 to 6 nights a week. And so we were constantly keeping our plots flexible to the point where they would change things all the time. They'd blow up their own base to change the future. They would meet a bunch of bad guys, turn them into children, and adopt them. That sort of thing. And so what I had planned was often going off the deep end. Sometimes they would even write their own whole plots in their head about what was going on that turned out to be 100% wrong. But I ran with them sometimes. But my post-college group was a bit more plot-oriented. And I had to adjust back to that, where they wanted to have very set adventures, pretty much straightforward. They wanted to have this is what we're doing, this is where we're going, this is our goal, we're going to gather treasure or steal a spaceship, whatever. I read a lot more modules that way. When Pathfinder came out, I read a lot of the Pathfinder stuff. But even then, I was often throwing chunks of it away and adapting that. When I came to Buffalo, I've got a mixture. I've had Buffalo group are much more into the facilitated adventures. What I find is interesting is that I've got the group that I had before the one I'm with now was a mix of storyteller and facilitators in the same group. And that was more difficult to run for a lot of the time. Because you had some players that wanted things laid out very structured in front of them, and other players that wanted to freeform everything and wanted to constantly go off on side quests. And it was not a case of struggling with the GM as much as it was oftentimes the group itself was struggling with their own goals and what they wanted to do. One group wanted to hang out in town and talk to the bartender, and the other group just wanted to go in a dungeon and get treasure. And that's something I also have to adjust for. Early on, I think the thing that got me going from that 80-90% into something a little more facilitating was a group of books from the 80s called The Companions. There were a bunch of modules, The Curse on Ferrith, The Street of Gems. And it was the first group of adventuring books I ever saw that at the beginning of the adventure, they had a timeline that's saying, this is what happened before the players came to town. This is what's going to happen at these times in the town, unless the players do something else. So if your players decide to run off and do this is what happens in the background, so that when they come back, you know what's going on ahead of time. And then they talked about how to plot around that. And also what to do if the players skip certain plots, because there were 3 major, encounter areas and events. And things that were supposed to happen, goblins come and poison the beekeeper's bees so that when the goblins attack, the bees don't defend them. If the players happen to be there, let them stop the goblins. Let them keep the goblins from poisoning. They actively encourage you as a GM that if the players start to foil your plot, let them. Here's what's going to happen otherwise, but let them do that. And for me, it was an eye-opener because I thought, oh my god, I'm actually allowed to not follow the plot. It took a long time to make that more reasonable, but that's what it was. So it's not just the groups, it was the games and the people I played with. Also, if you get your hands on the Companions books, they are very 80s in their design, but every adventure is written with the idea that you can play the 6 modules out of order, even though they're all part of the same plot. And there's a lot of, this is what's going on in the background, this is what your players are doing. So it's kind of fun. So, last thing I would say is the one thing I learned from playing with more modern players is if you have information to give, don't try to force the players to the person that has it. Just make sure that whoever they talk to gives them the information they need to keep the plot moving, and let it go from there. Doesn't matter if they're supposed to get it from the bartender. If they go to the temple guy knows the same rumor. Give it to him. I've seen way too many adventures written that if the players don't talk to this one person, they don't get the information they need to have.
We can do a whole show on that.
That's the classic. The clue is going to be found.
Yep.
Where the clue is going to be found, we don't know yet, but it's going to be found because they need it.
You know what, Bob? Put a pin in that. Clues. Clues and mystery. We should do an adventure. We should do a show on how to do decent clues and mystery adventures.
Ding.
Ding.
There we go.
And on that note, Bob?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, I've had my growth as a role player, is almost in sum total encompassed in the amount of time that I've been playing with Phil. Because that's where the variety started to come in. That's where the different ideas and different thought processes started to come in, and different stuff like that. Prior to Phil, it was your classic old school D&D stuff with the same type of people that had the same type of mentality, and there wasn't a lot of variation. And then I started hanging out with Phil, and right out of the gate, the first game that we picked up to get ready to run was Castle Falkenstein.
I'm very
nice.
much the weird uncle, right? Who shows up at the family reunion, right? Like, look what I got, kids.
Castle Falkenstein is about as far from the traditional D&D that I was playing prior to that as you can get at that time. And we never got it off the ground, unfortunately. It'd be interesting to see where we would have gone with it, if it had actually gone anywhere. We did some prep, and then I don't remember what happened. Was somebody... Was that when we decided to add in Mike and
No,
Chris,
I don't know what made us switch, but we were gonna play it, then we didn't play it, so instead we ran a one-shot of a little game called The Whispering Vault.
Yeah. and then we kind of went off that way.
And then after we got through Whispering Vault, I was like, you know what game you guys might like? Is this game Amber.
And that was that.
Yeah.
But, that's where, especially over the last 10 years, my growth as a player and a GM, even though I haven't GM'd a lot, I've learned a lot from all of the people and exposure that I've had. But as these two have already said, the different things that you're going to play, all of that stuff goes into the mix and changes your perceptions. And really, the most compelling thing for me was the narrative style of game. When we started playing the more narrative style of game, where players had a lot more agency and the GM didn't have as much plot figured out, and things could go just about anywhere, that really opened my eyes to true storytelling at the table, which is kind of a contradiction, because storytelling from the perspective of the overall goal of the session of sitting down at the table, what are you doing? You're there to tell a story.
But collaborative storytelling.
Collaborative,
I think,
right. That's the key word. So yeah, it's the narrative style games with high player agency really have been the ones that had the most impact on me. And then adjacent to that, kind of a 1B, the people that I've been playing with who really leaned into those games or introduced me to those games, that's the other part of that equation. So that's where all that comes from for me.
As a point of reference, you and I are in the middle of our 27th year of gaming.
Sounds about right.
2024 will be 30 years we've gamed together. So yeah. So when Bob and I have like a number of overlapping stories and experiences, it's because literally I have gamed more with Bob than I have gamed with anyone else in my entire life. So yes, I have so many shared stories and experiences because so much of my gaming has been with Bob. Like I met you I met you within a month of moving to Buffalo. And everyone else in that gaming group, that initial gaming group, is gone. Although Jim's back now.
Jim's back, yeah. Jim went away.
Jim was gone for like 20 years and came back. Like, yeah. So there's so many stories where Bob and I overlap each other because literally we were both there.
that's the way it is, yeah. Oh, man.
I know, that's wild, isn't it? I was just sitting here doing the pocket math as I was thinking about it. I'm like, oh man, like 2024 will be 30 years that we've known each other.
Yeah, here's hoping for another 27 more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or digital uploading.
Yeah.
We shall game forever. They'll just put stacks in us.
There you go. I'm all for it. All right. Well, I think that covers the end of that question. So,
yeah, that's our expanded look at the Gnome Stew article I wrote on storytellers and facilitators.
We hope this was helpful and gives you some insight into what brings you enjoyment when you're running games.
Yeah, and now one more trip into the chat room before we hit the conversation corner. So, excuse me. I have to go to this because I saw the term maximum Gygax cross through. So Jared, in his attempt to not interact with the chat room tonight, has been interacting, which is, it's good. He said, Gygaxian plotting. Here's a sandwich. 20 rooms later, if they don't have the sandwich, they can't find the secret door with the lock. 20 rooms later, this is a TPK. Too bad you didn't figure out the sandwich puzzle.
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The key to maximum Gygax, he says, is that you don't even tell the GM reading the adventure that the sandwich is important. Which is so
exactly.
true of those old school modules.
Oh, yeah.
You get all the way through and you're like, oh shit, they needed the sandwich?
Yep.
Yeah, if you didn't prep those things and like go back and like find it and highlight it or something, oh yeah, you just like you screwed yourself. Like if you were like as a kid, like sometimes I would only read like, they're on level 1, so I just read the level 1 portion of the adventure.
Yep.
Then you get to level 4 and realize, yes, that they forgot the sandwich on level 1. And you're just like, oh, that's when I started learning, like, you know what? This sandwich is now on level 4. Like,
That's where you got to turn, because if you don't do that, then the whole thing falls apart. It's like, oh yeah, sandwich is not on level 1, it's on 4. There it is. We'll slide it right over there.
It is. I mean, and again, it goes to the same thing about like why so many of us were storyteller GMs was like that's also how adventures are produced, right? Adventures like 80s adventures were like written were not only written like that, but they were written in this kind of very storyteller. Like it didn't say like let the players figure out how like let the players decide who they're going to talk to and then give them these pieces of information. They would literally be like, if you did not talk to the kid in the store who was trying to steal candy, you cannot have this piece of information.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's how, I mean, when you are first learning to roleplay, you learn by mimicking, which is why it's awesome that people today, when they're learning to like roleplay or GM, like can go watch streams and listen to APs and I was in a vacuum. There were like 2 other guys in my group that GM'd and they didn't like GMing. They just made me do it. So I was like my own echo chamber.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the idea that, so much of the game was also designed randomly. There were so much of it was just, you rolled randomly if it was in rooms. And so not only did you have a fourth story, but the fourth story often was completely random because even the designer had no idea what was actually going to be going on from point A to point B.
Also, the craft was new, and it honestly at times just wasn't as good. Like, just like we weren't. I mean, it's like watching 70s. It's like watching 70s TV shows, right? Like they're just not as tight or as good as modern TV shows because it was new, and they were fumbling their way through the medium. Which is why, like today, like we're much better at these things. It's why I often resist the nostalgia to play older games because almost every time it's nostalgia, not the game that I'm excited about.
Yep.
Which is why I like when somebody takes an older game and modernizes it, right? So like, for instance, the Twilight 2000, that was a game that I thought was a awesome premise. I literally bounced off the rules because I was in 6th grade. And if you tried to read those GDW rules in 6th grade, it was literally impenetrable. And now it gets picked up by Free League. And I'm like, shit, yeah, I'm playing this game. Like this is the concept I loved married with good modern game mechanics.
Yep.
I can make some shit happen now.
Yeah.
And just like that TMNT, that Kickstarter, like, I'm in love with this Kickstarter that I've been following.
Yeah.
Because it's modernizing TMNT, which the Palladium system was agonizing. And like, if I could just play mutant animals, but in a slicker system, like, I'm in, baby.
Yep.
Like, I'm in.
You know what that makes me want to do?
Yeah, what is it?
Makes me want to go back to Witchcraft, take another deep, hard look at the mechanics of Witchcraft, and see if there's a way to pull those up into the 21st century.
Really, what you want to figure out is the Witchcraft game, how compatible is it with the Great American Witch? Like, do you even have to do any work? Like, did Christopher Gray already solve that problem and we just haven't looked yet?
That is entirely possible. Because that
I agree with you, right? Like,
yeah.
For a 90s game, what was it? CJ Corella, Eden Publishing.
Yeah.
Oh, I fucking love that game. Witchcraft is the craft, role playing game. Like,
there were a lot of things about that I really enjoyed, and
I did too.
I think the nostalgia factor would still be high, but I think there's some of it that would still hold up.
I think that game is in better shape than. Yes, I agree. I think that game is in decent shape. It would still feel very 90s, as in, pass fail results, no fail forward or whatever. But the mechanics for magic were fun.
Yeah.
Like the building up of essence and then casting it out, and the different traditions of magic or psionic. Like,
yeah.
It's more playable than not playable. Oh, you bastard!
That may be a side evening for me, is looking at Great American Witch and Witchcraft, and
just see how much it doesn't line up.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we should probably slide ourselves into the conversation corner now and get into a little more of the loose convo.
Mm-hmm.
Let me do the thing with the button and the stuff. I really like having a soundbar.
Yeah, right?
All right, conversation corner. Here we go. So as Phil mentioned, we had our session 0 for iHunt, which did not go the way I expected it to go. It's not like totally off the rails or anything like that. It's just I did not expect my two compatriots to be like, oh yeah, I'm like a total noob at this and I've never been out there hunting. And I was like, oh, okay. Because I came up with a concept of someone who's a survivor, and has been out there in the streets going it alone for a while, and is kind of savvy. So, I'll be running the show and trying not to get these two kids killed. Although one of them's not really a kid, he's older than me. Tony is playing an older guy, if I recall correctly. But yeah, this is going to be one of those games. I kind of had missed playing Fate myself. It feels like, oh man, I fucking love Fate. Mm-hmm. It's like we go away from it, and then we slide back over to Fate for something, and we're like, oh man, why are we not playing Fate? Right, I fucking love this game. And with playing every other Friday, Dresden Files Accelerated, it reminded me of certain things, and I kind of got back into the groove of like this past game of Dresden. I looked at Chris on the screen and I said, hey Chris, before we go into that, I'm self-compelling my trouble right now. The supernatural always finds me. I said, take that and do with it what you will. I'm taking my fate point.
Yes.
And he's like, thank you. He's like, I have no idea what I'm going to do with that yet, but I will in a minute.
Uh-huh.
So I'm like, Phil, get ready. Cause
I love it. Right. And you're going to have a new, you have a new one too. You have the Imperil.
Yes. I can imperil it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a new move. It's
going to be interesting. So, very much looking forward to my Peter Parker with the serial numbers filed off.
I love it. As soon as you said it, I was like, all I can picture is this dude, like in some like basement with a heavy bag, like punching the shit out of it, like flash back into like watching Uncle Ben get eaten by zombies in like, on, like in the subway or something, and just being, like, and then like he's got the wrist, like the forearm wraps, and he's like, I gotta go do this. Like picks up his baseball bat and heads out the door.
It gets better than that, Phil, because prior to what we decided on at the end of the most recent of the session 0, I decided that that it was a werewolf that killed Uncle Ron.
Oh,
so right out of the gate, we're gonna have some drama. Oh yeah, he's dead.
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't know. I felt he was dead, but
we'll get there.
Who knows? Oh god,
Jersey werewolves, man.
Jersey worst. These fucking guys over here.
I know you guys picked a good city too. We were the default for the game is in this fictional West Coast city, but we were all like, yeah, none of us have any real connections to the West Coast.
I mean,
we're like,
we've made up shit before for towns and stuff like that, and it's like, but it's like if we're gonna go with a town that exists, I think San Gennaro actually exists.
No, I think it's fictional.
You think it's fictional?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's fictional.
I could have sworn there was a San Gennaro.
I think Jared read the iHunt for the review. I'm pretty sure San Gennaro's fake.
But be that as it may, what we have always had success with, especially with this particular group of Phil, me, Tony, and Glenn, is regardless of whether we have a fictional town or a real town, we fictionalize it enough for the game that we make it our version of the town, and then we go and we have connections to it, and we're good to go. But when somebody was talking about like, oh, let's do like Pittsburgh or whatever like that, and I forget who it was Glenn or Tony, said something about Philly, because I had stepped away to use the bathroom, and I come back and I'm like, did somebody just say Philly? And I'm like, are we gonna fuck around and find out?
Yes.
I'm like, all right, well, I said, Gritty's a monster then.
I'm literally putting the aspect "fuck around and find out" as like one of the setting aspects.
Yeah. So yes. that game is going to be a hoot. I can tell already.
Yeah, I like the I like it. It's a good mix. It's a rough city. It's in the tri-state area, and it has a lot of colonial history. So like the vampire scene for Philly is gonna like have some deep fucking roots, like constitutional signers and shit like that. And yeah, it'll be fun. I'm gonna start doing some research. It's actually one of the things I dig about when we play in cities is that I will go do a bunch of research on a city, like learn its neighborhoods and some of its history and stuff. And we were gonna do a game. We wound up not playing it. We were gonna do a game in Sao Paulo, and I like learned a ton of shit about Sao Paulo, and I was like, first of all, the city is fucking cool as hell, except for driving in it. It's like a fucking nightmare to drive in. Sao Paulo has more helicopters, more helicopter taxis than any other, any other city in the world. But yeah, so I love it. I love it. And Philly was just like the right level of,
big city, but like
grittiness, I think is the
and grittiness and
literally.
And it's gonna be a hoot. And the last thing I'll say about iHunt, one of the other aspects that you have is your dream, your vision board, and it's the thing that you're aspiring to try and get to. And so, based on my Peter Parker analogy, I'm living with my Aunt Sue, helping her pay for rent and for her medication and stuff like that, because now that Uncle Ron is gone, she doesn't have him to help her out, so it falls on me. And so my dream is to get us to a better place. So my vision board aspect is moving on up like George and Wheezy, which
the youngins didn't get. But I was like, as soon as I saw it, I busted out laughing. I'm like, I totally understand this.
I'm like, I'm gonna totally Jefferson's this thing right up here.
Yes.
So that's iHunt. Another thing that I did every once in a while when I wanna, I like to watch something while I'm having meals, but I don't like to watch anything that I need to focus on to pay super close attention to. Like, I will not watch a WandaVision episode while I'm having breakfast or lunch or dinner. Like, that's not meal vision. That's focus vision. That's something I got to pay attention to. So I'll pick things like, like the Avatar stuff, Legend of Korra. That's usually lunch, that kind of thing. But there's a documentary series on Disney Plus called Marvel 616, which I previously mentioned. They had the first episode is all about the Spider-Man from Japan, the Japanese Spider-Man. It's a wacky episode, a lot of interesting information in there. The fourth episode, I want to say, it's called Lost and Found, and it's a documentary that's made by this comedian who basically the gist of it, it's like a fake, like he's making a documentary of his failed attempt to pitch a show to Disney Plus. And basically what it is he's going in, he wants to do a new show with a Marvel property, and they tell him to go for the not the low-hanging fruit of the more common characters, go find somebody from the archives, somebody that people may not remember, or somebody that didn't get a lot of play. And so he goes through, and I'm sure some of the characters that were described during the course of this episode were made up, but there's a lot of characters that are actual Marvel characters that are little-known characters that were like, they showed up here, they showed up there, and then they disappeared. And what he settles on is a team called Brute Force, which is a group of 5 animals that this scientist equips with cybernetic and robotic attachments that give them verbal sentience, and like they're able to like think and articulate, and they go off and they start doing like this like eco police kind of a thing, where they go fight the bad guys that are like polluting the planet, and they have this throwdown with the bad guys group of enhanced animals, and it's wacky as hell. But it's like listening to them talk about some of these old characters, and it's like, oh, I know that character. But when he mentioned Brute Force, I'm like, I gotta find out if this is real or if they made this part up. And it's a real 4-issue series from 1990. And it was one of those ideas where companies were coming in and they're like, we want to do a comic book to try and drive toy sales because of like Transformers and different stuff like that. So they came up with the idea of these eco warriors, and it was terrible but hilarious. And the process by which this comedian goes through his path trying to get this into a pitch form. He goes to this animation company. They're like, I want you to do some animation for me to spotlight these characters so that I can use it in my pitch. And he hands them a piece of paper with a number on it. He's like, what can I get for this? And they're like, I don't know, like 2 minutes. Because he's working on like zero budget. It's just a funny episode, but the characters that are in the episode, hysterical. There's also another one right before that, which is focusing on 2 artists from different parts of the world. One from Spain and one from, I want to say, like, Brazil. And it's like all about their path from being freelance artists to becoming comic artists for Marvel. And the characters are the one's drawing Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. The other one's drawing Miles Morales, Spider-Man. It's a very good episode and very interesting. And then finally, of course, I'm chomping at the bit for the last episode of WandaVision on Friday. I'm just like, episode 8 was just like mind blowing. So looking forward to that and ready to go. Enough about me. Jerry.
Oh, a bunch of little things. Obviously, I watched Willy's Wonderland. The same evening, I watched Brightburn, which is a kind of superhero horror movie. It was written by the Gunn brothers, the 2 brothers of James Gunn, who did Guardians of the Galaxy and Slither and a bunch of other things. And when you watch the movie, you can obviously tell it was written for him and then somebody else directed it. It's even got like a lot of his standees, like Elizabeth Banks is in it, and Michael Rooker. The premise is basically, what if Superman landed and his parents weren't as good at raising him as the Kent family?
Oh, I've seen the previews for this. Yeah.
It could have used a slightly bigger budget and better directing, but it's a good movie. It's fun. It's terrifying. I mean, 12-year-old with Superman's powers is terrifying.
Sure.
And the real payoff, unfortunately, comes during the credits at the very end, which I won't ruin, but the credits set up the possibility of a sequel that could be very interesting. But it was fun. It's a good, put it on in the background while you're doing something, because there's a lot of stuff that you're kind of watching stuff go on in the background. We had our first full session of Kids on Broom with GM Glenn Seiler this weekend. It's a lot of fun. We're playing, obviously teenagers in a magical college, and one of the players is playing a teacher, and the rest of us are playing kind of shenanigan students who are trying to figure out mystery. And these are the same mechanics as Kids on Bikes, and look, I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Nice.
I'll just say WandaVision was great and let that slide past, because you can't talk about it. The one that surprised me this week was Superman and Lois. The first episode of Superman and Lois dropped this week. And I'm not a big fan of, I hated the Lois and Clark Terry Hatcher thing. And I've never been a really big fan of the entire Superman-Lois relationship up until they finally got things in like the Bruce Timm era. This was really good. Just the first couple of minutes of it established Superman as kind of the Superman we want. At least I want the good-natured hero, not super violent, always trying to come up with solutions, establishing the premise, and then the story's pretty good. It's a lot of fun. This is a Lois who is in love with Clark Kent, who just happens to be Superman, instead of kind of the 70s and 80s Lois Lane we had, which was she's in love with Superman and Clark Kent just has to be somebody she has to put up with kind of thing. And it's really well done. And they made both characters very strong and empowered. And I'm looking forward to it as a series. Plus, there's a little bit of action. If you get a chance, you can watch the first episode for free. And I've not been a huge fan of the DC TV stuff, I guess. I just never got sunk into the DC TV series the way some people have. This one's going to hook me in, I think. It might get me to watch a lot more of the other movies. And watch more of Lovecraft Country. It's a great social commentary, but it needs more Lovecraft. That's all I'll say. And lastly, we did our Savage Worlds game this weekend, which is our Savage Eberron, which is much more of a storyteller than facilitator game. But we had two of the player characters finally had their first date. That was a big chunk of it, which was a lot of fun to watch, with comments during the game of, well, now you've seen how I am on a first date kind of thing, where basically Chris's character and Smitty's character have been kind of meet cuting for the last couple of adventures, and kind of had a foiled not date when Bridget's halfling decided to crash the date. This time they actually went off on their own, and we had about an hour session of them kind of fumbling around with first date thing and delving into all their character flaws and revealing a lot about the characters' pasts and histories. It's a really good role-playing situation. And I liked the idea of the date as a way to have players reveal things about each other by asking questions that you would ask on a first date. So, what was your family life like growing up? What did you do for fun? What did you do during the war? Why are you here in town? That kind of stuff. That if you just sat there at the table and had people kind of rattle out those ideas would be boring. But in the case of a date setting, having them ask those questions really revealed a lot about the players and the characters, and just gave a lot. I'm really happy with it. So that's where I'll go. I just had this fun week with a lot of little neat things. If you like not quite horror movies, I would still recommend Brightburn and Willy's Wonderland. They're not great, but they're a lot of fun. So, Phil?
Yeah, couple things. So I went and got my vaccine out in Syracuse. So I made a day of it yesterday. I actually made a full day of it thanks to Jerry. I drove out and hit Long John Silver's in Batavia.
How was it?
It was pretty good. You know what I've learned is it's perfectly fine Long John Silver's, but I also live in Buffalo, so getting a good fish fry, at this time of the year, is a piece of cake. So while it was delicious and I enjoyed it, I actually had a better fish fry at from It's Greek to Me.
Oh yeah.
Like, their fish fry was delicious last week, and I'm probably going to have it again this week. But anyway, I hit that. Then I went to the vaccination site, which was great. It's being run by the National Guard, and it is very efficient. I think I was in there a total of an hour from the time I walked in the door to the time I was cleared to leave after my 15-minute wait. Everybody was very nice. As I'm waiting online, Buffalo represents. I look over, and, they had us in one of those, serpentine queues. I look over, and there's a dude standing there in his tiger stripe Buffalo Bills Zumba pants, right? Mm-hmm. Like the full-on pants. He's got the Buffalo Bills jacket, and he's got the striped face mask with a Buffalo Bills helmet on it. And I'm just like, represents. Like, just,
there you go.
I see you, Buffalo. I see you in the line. I know you. So anyway, it was fine. So yeah, that was exciting. My arm is still sore. It's actually a lot less sore. It was, it's better. I woke up this morning with it, and I was like, this arm sucks. Now I have two arms that suck. But it is actually, by this point in the day, like, much better. And I didn't want to take anything for it because I really want my immune system, like, I don't want to cut down any inflammation or anything. Like, let this thing rock. I need this vaccine to take. So I did that. I've been watching a lot of Enterprise. I finished season 2. That's a way to end a season. That's definitely a season. Finale.
Oh, right. Season 2 finale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll make sense for people who've seen Enterprise before. So that was good. WandaVision is amazing. Mm-hmm. And I will say, without any spoilers, there is a 1-minute video of my favorite song from WandaVision on YouTube.
Yep.
And that song is majorly a spoiler. So.
Yes, it's majorly a spoiler. So if you've watched WandaVision, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I will warn people who haven't watched WandaVision, it is also becoming a meme. There are 2 memes that are emerging from stills from WandaVision about that particular character, which are great memes, but they are going to start to spoil some stuff about the show if you haven't seen it yet. So I'm very excited for WandaVision. Today, I was looking for something different to watch at lunchtime. So I went and started rewatching a TV show from CBS called Jericho. I don't know if you guys remember Jericho, but it's about this little town in Kansas. After a series of nuclear devices go off and wipe out a bunch of cities in the U.S. It was a CBS TV show. It actually got canceled after season 1, and the fans went so berserk that CBS was forced to do 7 episodes in season 2 to wrap the story up because people were so pissed. And I liked it a lot, so I've gone back and started watching it.
So it was. I actually have the first season on DVD and never actually got around to watching it because I didn't know how it was. So
yeah, I enjoyed it. It is very much a network TV show, but it's got a nice if you like disaster, post-apocalypse, and conspiracies, like I do, it's a wonderful convergence of those things. I thought the series was quite good, and it goes a full season. It is a 26 episode first season. And then CBS was like, we're done. And over the summer, if I remember correctly, and I have to go look it up online, there was like a campaign where people kept sending peanuts to CBS.
They were mailing literal peanuts to CBS headquarters.
Yeah. And I forget where it comes from, but it's a famous quote, like nuts to that or something. It was like from a famous general. And CBS capitulated, and they were just like, okay, fine. We'll go and film some more of this show. And I think there's like 7 more episodes in season 2, which was good because I think then they like helped tie off the show. But I started rewatching it again, and As soon as I watched it, I was like, oh yeah, right. The first time I watched this, I wanted it to be a role-playing game. It hasn't changed. Like, I'm still like, oh yeah, this would make a fantastic Twilight 2000 alternate setting or something.
That's cool.
So I watched that, and I also started watching, there's a new, I think there's like 6 episodes of it. There's a samurai show that showed up on Netflix, and I don't remember the full name of it. But I'm like 4 or 5 episodes into that, and that's really good. It's like a history of the Sengoku period in the 1500s, and it's little bits of drama interspersed with historians talking about various battles and various generals and other players during that time. It's a piece of history that I absolutely love.
It's called Age of Samurai: Battle for Japan.
That's it. If I had not been a biologist and had wound up somehow as a history major, that would be the piece of history I would have studied. I'd like absolutely love that period of time. So it is also very good. It is super bloody, though. I will tell you, like, the little bits that they intersperse are like super graphically violent. But the history part is actually really good, and they have like a number of historians that go through and talk about the different historical figures of those times. I haven't really done much else. I've like watched a bunch of stuff. That's it. I don't know. We're gonna play the Sprawl this week, so that's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's all I got for now. That's good. I'm good.
All right, I will say one more thing before we jump into the closing, because it just occurred to me, and I'll throw it out there real quick. Fans of the Tales of Arcadia, Troll Hunters, Three Below, and Wizards from Guillermo del Toro on Netflix, there is a 4th entry into that series called Troll Hunters: Rise of the Titans. To the best of my knowledge, it is a single film that has everybody in it from all 3 previous shows, and it's like the big climactic ending to the whole saga. And that's supposed to be coming out in like May or July or something like that. So I'm jonesing for that because that stuff was really good. Okay. That being said, it is time for the Patreon shoutouts.
Hey.
Thank you to everyone for being our patron, especially in this instance, Dan Simons, David Walker, Drew Smith, Secret Weapon of the Show, Glenn Seiler, Tablemate in our iHunt game, Jason Pinella, Jason Pitt, Gene Lorbert, Jeff Stevens, Jim Morrison, and Joe Rosso. Thank you for patronizing us, and thanks to everyone for listening tonight.
If you are free on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. the Queen's time, you're welcome. Come join us live on Twitch, where you can chat with other awesome listeners in the chat room for life and ask us the occasional question.
If you cannot make it a live show, check out our podcast each week, wherever you get your podcast. And take a listen to some of the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, such as Mastering Dungeons, Bonestone Obsidian, the FM Gamers, Tannis Talking Games, the Gnome Cast, Janku Hustle, The Lounge, Bonus Experience, and back episodes of She Super Deep. You can and should also check out our sibling podcasts, Tabletop Bellhop, The Knights of the Night, and the always amazing Gaming and BS.
After you have prepped an intricate story, and before you ask the players what they're going to do next, leave us some feedback. You can always reach us via email at mmp@misdirectedmark.com. Hit us up on Twitter. The show in the network is at Misdirected Mark. He is Robert M. Everson. He is GM Gerrymander, and I am DNA Phil.
If you like what we do here and on the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, you can support our Patreon campaigns. MMP, Mastering Dungeons, and Panda Stocking Games are at patreon.com/MMP. Zhenghu Hustle is at patreon.com/Zhenghu Hustle, and Bonus Experience is at patreon.com/Bonus Experience. Patrons of MMP, Mastering Dungeons, and Panda Stocking Games get access to the after show, pre-production show notes, musical parodies, the Bamboo Lounge, and other special releases.
This has been a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. Mic drop.
We out.